I don't know that I've ever had a musical introduction to a sermon from Cher. It was about time. That's what Jonathan just said. It was about time. There you go. Well, this is a weighty weekend. There is a lot in this weekend. I know that because throughout this week, as we got ready for this sermon time, Shanna would come to me and she would say, now the march is this weekend. Are you going to say something about the march in your sermon? And I said, yeah, I'll say something about the march. And she said, now the Poor People's Campaign kicked off yesterday. Are you going to say something about that in your sermon? And I said, yeah. And then we have the Easter egg hunt today. Are you going to say something about that in your sermon? And I said, yeah, probably. And she said, now Holy Week's coming up. Are you going to say something about that in your sermon? So there's a lot that we have to cover here today. Fake news. There's so much in today that it's almost easy for us to overlook the fact that this project of transformation that we've been working on right here, this cross and these prayers that have been tied together, we've been working on this all through Lent. And this is our last Sunday of this series, this worship series, CrossWords. We have covered different words that have been tied into the fabric: vulnerability, disappointment, nostalgia, haunted, anger. And now today, our last word, regret. Regret. Now, it may seem strange to you on this weekend where, as Shanna's prayer spoke about, and as many of you witnessed yesterday in your participation in the March for Our Lives, this is a weekend very much so driven by youth, by livelihood. So I think it's no mistake that the youngest minister on staff is the one preaching about regret, although you can take that to mean what you want it to, as I am 33, the age of Jesus. Not much pressure there. We come to the regret. And there was a piece of David White's reflection on regret that really rubbed me the wrong way. He said this: except for brief senses of having missed a tide, having hurt another, having taken what is not ours, youth is not yet ready for the rich current of abiding regret that runs through and emboldens a mature human life. When I hear this, I feel like this scene from We Are the Millers comes up. This winter's name is Scotty. Scotty is brought home by the daughter of the family, and when she walks in, he displays his life motto to the father of the family. You can see it right there. In case you don't know, regrets is spelled incorrectly. But when we talk about regrets, we think about this phrase more often than not: no regrets. Because it's this kind of anthem of the day. We hear it from many people, especially those who are younger, that we have to live without regret. That the idea behind that, though, is taken as foolishness. Because to live without regret seems impossible, and yet we hear it decried by many different people, perhaps with overborne confidence in some moments. No regret. The place where we hear it most often is often in graduation speeches. I told the 8:30 service this. When I was in high school, I went to Shawnee Mission West High School. I got to be a commencement speaker, and I will confess to you that in my graduation address to the 2003 graduating class of Shawnee Mission High School, I yelled two things at the end of my commencement address. One was, "We are Vikings," and the other was, "No regrets." I think I regret that. But the anthem of no regret comes back to us in graduation speeches over and over and over again. A life lived without anything weighing down, holding back, bearing forth. I don't know that no regrets is fair. In fact, as I was getting ready for this week, I was reminded about this 2012 graduation speech that one of my favorite authors gave, George Saunders. He spoke at the 2012 graduation of Syracuse University. And as he got up to give his speech, George Saunders is a humorist, kind of in the vein of Mark Twain, if you've never read him. George gets up to give his speech, and he says, "I am an old person. They really only like to ask old people to give these commencement addresses. They like us to ask them to give them for two reasons, because old people are good for two things. First of all, if you get us up in front of people, we might do one of our old-timey dance jigs." That's his joke. And the second is that old people are really great at talking about what they regret. And they hope I might share with you what I regret in the hopes that you won't regret it too. Saunders went on to say, "When I begin to look back at the things that might be considered regrets, I begin to catalog things in my mind. I begin to think about that time that I went skinny dipping in a Sumatran river. And as I was in the river, I looked up and I saw what were about 300 monkeys, all on electrical lines, using the river I was in, naked, as their personal bathroom." He said, "I don't know that I regret that." He said, "After that happened, I got sick for the better part of 7 months, and it affected my life for 3 years. Do I regret the sickness that happened after that?" And he said, "I don't know that I even regret that." Then he recalled a memory from his childhood. He said, "I remember playing hockey, and there was this girl in the crowd I really wanted to impress. And as I was going to score, I remember putting too much effort into it, and as I did, I fell, tripped over my own skates, and I threw my hockey stick into the crowd, almost hitting the girl that I liked, while letting out a high-pitched, shrill scream, and at the same time scoring on my own goal." He said, "I don't even know that I regret that. But I do know one thing I regret." He said, "When I was a kid, there was a new kid in town who had just moved in, a young girl. And when she moved in, she didn't have any friends. She didn't have any connections. She tended to sit alone at lunch. She had the nervous habit of taking a strand of her hair and tucking it into her mouth and chewing on it. Some folks thought that she was strange. Some folks made fun of her. I never really talked to her. I didn't even interact with her. And then, one day, she was gone." Saunders said, "She moved to a different city. Just gone." He said, "I think about her more than I think about most people I went to high school with, because I regret the way that I didn't treat her." He said, regret in this life for him, that means more than anything else, is found in the moments where his kindness failed. Where someone needed something and he didn't go out of his way to give it to them. It didn't even occur to him, or it did occur to him more and he refused to do it. He said, regret is a failure of kindness. Regrets like those are what our other Lenten prophet, Brene Brown, calls failures of courage. She calls them something else that's really important, though. She says that regret is the birthplace of empathy. Regret is the birthplace of empathy, the place where we get to stand in somebody else's shoes and feel how they feel and be beside them. The birthplace of empathy. An invitation to empathy. I don't know if that's all there is to regret, though. Because regret feels like a much heavier word than just that. The moments where we fail to be kind. I'm remembering this moment where in ministry I had been called by Rose. And Rose said, Pastor Ryan, we need you to come. She said, Dick something's wrong. He's not responding to us very well, and he's sitting on the couch in the back room, and he won't get up. Dick and Rose were an older couple, and they had come to this moment in their lives where they could no longer really take care of themselves at home. So they were asked by their family, and they agreed that they would find a place where they could receive the care that they needed. So they had two main requirements for the place that they chose. The first was that they could have rooms that were adjoining to one another. And the second was that it had to be a full smoking facility so that they could keep with their 2-pack-a-day habit. They found the right place for them. And the reason Dick was sitting at the back door was because he would open the door and let the smoke out through it. I showed up that day into a smoke-filled room. He sat there on his 3rd pack for the day. And I sat down next to him and I said, Dick, what's wrong? Rose called me and she said that you are just not really responding to anybody. He said, I'm glad you came. I feel like I might be able to talk to you about this. Rose sat in the room with us because she was worried about him, just behind me a little bit. I said, Dick, what is happening? He said, I know that my road isn't much longer. He said, but there's so much that I bear that I feel like I need forgiveness for, that I regret, that I feel makes me unworthy of anything that could ever be given to me. I said, what do you mean? And he said, Rose and I have been married for almost 60 years. And I regret to tell you that about 49 of those I was unfaithful. I looked back at Rose to see how she was. And Rose was sitting there with her hands folded like they always were, and she was going. Dick said, I always told her what had happened. I always confessed. And she always listened, and she always forgave me. And then he said, I regret that I haven't loved her enough. That feels like a lot more than just a failure of kindness. A lot more than that. Sometimes regret isn't just an invitation to empathy. Sometimes it's an invitation to intentionality. When Dick confessed to me in that moment, and we held it together, he said, I'm telling you this now because I am so broken, and I want to be different before I go. An invitation to intentionality and regret moves us not only beyond empathy, but into a different place, a different way. A life lived different than the past. There's a great line from David White where he says that regret is an invitation to a future lived better than our past. But I still feel like that doesn't quite get us all the way through regret. There's this sense to me of regret that I'm still trying to quite put my finger on. It was honoring, it was humbling, it was amazing to join with you yesterday at the March for Our Lives. I know that many of you were there. I know that I didn't get to see all of you, and I'm sorry for that. But you all didn't have giant signs that said, I'm right here. It was amazing to walk through that space and to see everybody with their signs. The signs, I've got a few pictures of them. You can't pray away guns. The signs were inspiring and interesting as we went through. We have some of them left up here from the New Poor People's Campaign event yesterday that folks were kind enough to leave here for you to see if you weren't able to join us. These signs arm me with books, pencils, therapists, more more. As I read sign after sign after sign, there was a real palpable sense to me there that I regretted that this march had to happen. There's a sense to me in which regret feels like a promise I broke that I didn't even know I made. One child is worth more than all of the guns in the world. But one sign in particular really broke me down, and it was this one. Am I next? You can't really see it, but the woman holding that sign is maybe in 8th grade. I regret that has to happen, that we have to speak up like this, that we have come to this moment. Regret like that is an invitation beyond empathy, an invitation beyond intentionality, an invitation to commitment. Am I next? If I wasn't broken down enough, all I had to do was imagine that it was just a few years in the future and it was one of my daughters holding that sign. Regret can feel like a promise you broke that you didn't even know you made. And it can be an invitation to commitment. You know, Holy Week could just as well be easily called the week of regret. There's a lot that's about to happen here that we might end up regretting on the other side. Okay, we might not. We will definitely end up regretting on the other side. Today we stand with Jesus as he rides into town on a donkey, as people take the cloaks off of their back, throw them on the ground as they wave palms above him, crying, "Hosanna, save us." Do you think that any one of them knows that by the end of the week they might say, "Man, I wish that had happened differently. God, I regret what's happened here." Holy Week can just as well be called an invitation to regret. But it's amazing how it comes each and every year, and it reminds us each and every year that while regret lives in our life, there's possibility beyond it. David White says, regret is an invitation to a life lived in a future better than our past. But he also says that regret is like a tide rising that washes over us, signaling a new promise, a new hope. I was walking yesterday with many members of the church, different people. As I did that, it was amazing to join with them, to see faces, to walk the path that was drawn by youth, to join hearts and minds. I felt invited to empathy. I felt invited to intentionality. I felt invited to commitment. And I felt invited as we walk with Jesus through this week to live differently, to know that regret is possible, but that there's so much more beyond it. To answer alongside Jesus that question that haunts, that bears with as we look in the faces of our own children. Am I next? Am I next? As we journey with Jesus through this week of regret, let us be the next to say yes to empathy, to intentionality, and to commitment. Let us be the next to walk with Jesus through the transformation of the cross for the possibility of resurrection for this world. You know, I could be wrong about this. I'm very young, but I hope I'm not. Amen.